I discovered my wife cheating on me with my best friend. In a world where betrayal can be hidden behind the closest smiles and friendships, some of the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from those we trust most. The people we invite into our homes, share our vulnerabilities with, and consider family can sometimes be the very ones who inflict the most devastating pain. This is the story of Lucas, a man whose life fell apart when he uncovered the unthinkable betrayal of his wife, cheating on him with his best friend, and how that discovery shattered not just one relationship, but the entire foundation of trust he had built his life upon. My name is Lucas, and I'm 40 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, where the mountain views from my office window once brought me peace, but now serve as silent witnesses to the wreckage of my former life. I work as an architect, a profession I chose because I've always loved creating structures that stand the test of time. Solid foundations, carefully planned designs, buildings meant to shelter and protect. The irony isn't lost on me that while I spent my career building structures designed to last, I failed to recognize that the most important structure in my life, my marriage, was crumbling from within. My wife, Amanda, is 38 and works as an interior designer. We met at a design conference 12 years ago, drawn together by our shared passion for creating beautiful spaces. She had an eye for color and texture that complemented my structural sensibilities perfectly. When she walked into a room, she could immediately envision its potential, seeing beauty where others saw only blank walls. I fell in love with her vision, her creativity, and the way she made even the simplest spaces feel like home. We were married for 8 years, and for most of that time, I believed our relationship was built on unshakable foundations: friendship, love, and mutual respect. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared dreams of one day opening a design firm together. We talked about having children someday, about growing old together in a house we would design ourselves. Our life together felt secure, predictable in the best possible way. One of the cornerstones of my life was my friendship with Mark, my best friend since college. We met during our freshman year at the University of Colorado, bonding over late-night study sessions and a shared love of hiking the Rocky Mountains. Mark studied business management while I pursued architecture, but our different paths never created distance between us. He was the best man at my wedding, the person I called when I got my first major contract, a friend who showed up with beer and pizza whenever I needed to vent about work stress. I trusted Mark like a brother, never once fearing betrayal from him or from my wife. Why would I? He'd been there through every major milestone of my adult life. He'd helped me pick out Amanda's engagement ring, practiced my wedding vows with me, and celebrated every anniversary with us. Mark was family, the kind of friend you assume will be in your life forever. And Amanda and Mark got along well, which I always saw as a blessing. My wife and best friend enjoying each other's company, making holidays and gatherings easy and comfortable. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed, the red flags I rationalized away because I trusted them both so completely. But at the time, everything seemed normal. Amanda and Mark started spending more time together than I was used to, but I believed it was because they were collaborating on a creative project. Amanda had mentioned wanting to redesign our living room, and Mark had recently started investing in real estate properties that needed interior design work. Their professional relationship made perfect sense to me, and I welcomed it. I was proud that the two people I cared about most were working together, combining their talents. However, small changes began to emerge, subtle shifts that my architect's eye for detail should have caught, but didn't, blinded as I was by trust. There were secret phone calls that stopped abruptly when I entered the room, Amanda's voice dropping to a whisper before she'd quickly say goodbye and hang up. When I asked who it was, she'd offer casual explanations. Just Mark asking about paint samples, or Mark had a question about the furniture layout. I noticed texts that Amanda hid from me, tilting her phone away or quickly locking the screen when notifications appeared. Her phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, now went everywhere with her, to the bathroom, to bed, even to the backyard when she was just checking the garden. The protectiveness seemed excessive, but when I mentioned it once, she laughed it off, saying she was just being more careful after a friend's phone had been stolen. There were late nights when Mark was visiting our home with increasing frequency. He'd drop by after work, supposedly to discuss design ideas, and stay for hours. Sometimes I'd come home from working late to find them on the couch together, sitting closer than seemed necessary, looking at design magazines or scrolling through Pinterest on Amanda's laptop. They'd separate slightly when I walked in, a movement so subtle I barely registered it at the time. Mark would greet me warmly, Amanda would kiss my cheek, and I'd join them, never suspecting that my presence was an interruption rather than a welcomed addition. Amanda began working late more frequently, claiming she needed to meet with clients or finish projects on tight deadlines. On weekends, she'd schedule site visits that took hours longer than seemed reasonable. Mark, coincidentally, also seemed busier than usual, often unavailable when I'd call to see if he wanted to grab lunch or catch a game. When our schedules did align and the three of us spent time together, there was a new energy I couldn't quite name. Inside jokes I wasn't part of, knowing glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, a familiarity that went beyond the friendship I'd encouraged. The physical intimacy between Amanda and me began to change as well. It didn't disappear entirely, but it became less frequent, more mechanical. She seemed distracted during our intimate moments, as if her mind was elsewhere. Afterward, she'd often check her phone, a habit that bothered me, but that I attributed to work stress. When I suggested we plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us, she'd agree, but then find reasons to postpone a client deadline, a project that couldn't wait, a commitment she'd forgotten about. I told myself I was being paranoid, that work stress was affecting my perception. Amanda had always been dedicated to her career, and Mark had always been a constant presence in our lives. Nothing had really changed, I reasoned. This was just a busy season, a period where professional demands were pulling everyone in different directions. The alternative, that something was fundamentally wrong, was too frightening to seriously consider. Then came the night that changed everything, shattering my carefully constructed denial and exposing the truth I'd been too trusting to see. It was a Thursday evening in late September. I'd left my phone at the office and had to drive back to retrieve it after dinner. When I returned home, Amanda was in the shower and her phone was charging on the kitchen counter, face up and unlocked, a rare moment of carelessness on her part. I never meant to invade Amanda's privacy. I've always believed that trust is essential in a marriage, that partners deserve private spaces in their lives. But as I walked past her phone, the screen lit up with a new message notification. The name at the top caught my eye, Mark, and below it, words that made my blood run cold. Missing you already. The night was incredible. Can't wait until Lucas's conference next week. We'll finally have a whole weekend together. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, my architect's steady fingers suddenly clumsy and uncertain. I opened the messaging app, and a sick, heavy feeling settled in my stomach as I scrolled through their conversation. The words hurt worse than any physical blow. Spoken promises I'd never heard Amanda make to me. Declarations of love that echoed our own wedding vows. Plans for secret meetings meticulously coordinated around my schedule. I love you, Amanda had written to Mark just hours earlier. I know we said we'd end this, but I can't imagine my life without you now. I love you too, Mark had responded. Lucas is my best friend, and the guilt is killing me, but what we have is real. We'll figure out how to tell him when the time is right. I felt physically ill reading their words, my vision blurring with tears I didn't know I was crying. There were messages going back months, 6 months, to be precise, documenting an affair that had blossomed right under my nose while I remained obliviously trusting. They talked about intimate moments they'd shared, places they'd met, close calls when they'd almost been discovered. They discussed their feelings for each other with a depth and passion that made it clear this wasn't just physical. They'd fallen in love. There were messages expressing guilt, especially from Mark, who wrote repeatedly about how much he valued our friendship and how terrible he felt about the betrayal. But the guilt clearly wasn't enough to stop him. Amanda's messages revealed her own internal conflict. She talked about caring for me, about the life we'd built together, but claimed that Mark understood her in ways I never had, that he made her feel alive again. I found photos too, pictures of them together at places I didn't recognize. Amanda smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, Mark's arm around her waist in a possessive gesture that spoke of ownership rather than friendship. There were intimate selfies that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship, images that burned themselves into my memory and would haunt me for months to come. My hands shook uncontrollably as I continued scrolling, each message a fresh knife wound. I learned that they'd been together the previous weekend when Amanda claimed to be at a design conference in Colorado Springs. I discovered that Mark's business trip to Boulder the month before had actually been a romantic getaway they'd taken together. I realized that the late client meetings had often been dinners with Mark at restaurants across town where they thought they wouldn't be recognized. The shower turned off upstairs, and I heard Amanda moving around in the bathroom. I had maybe 5 minutes before she came downstairs. My mind raced, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. The two people I trusted most in the world had been systematically lying to me for half a year. They'd looked me in the eye, shared meals with me, accepted my trust and affection, all while conducting a secret relationship that made a mockery of everything I believed about my life. I placed Amanda's phone back on the counter exactly where I'd found it, my movements mechanical, my body operating on autopilot while my mind struggled to catch up with this new reality. I walked to the living room and sat on the couch, the same couch where Amanda and Mark had sat together countless times, probably laughing internally at how blind I was. When Amanda came downstairs, her hair still damp from the shower, wearing the robe I'd given her for Christmas, she smiled at me with the same warm expression expression I'd seen 1,000 times. "Hey, honey, did you find your phone?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos inside me. Her smile faltered, some instinct perhaps warning her that this wasn't a normal conversation. "About what?" "About you and Mark." The color drained from her face. Her hand moved instinctively toward her phone on the kitchen counter, and I saw the moment she realized her mistake, leaving it unlocked and visible. "Lucas, how long?" I interrupted, standing up from the couch. "How long have you been sleeping with my best friend?" The confrontation that followed was shockingly raw, stripping away years of civility and revealing the ugly truth beneath. Amanda initially tried to deny it, but the denial was half-hearted, almost relieved to finally be caught. When I told her I'd read the messages, seen the photos, knew everything, she collapsed onto the couch, crying with a mixture of guilt and what looked almost like relief. "6 months," she whispered through tears. "It started 6 months ago." "How?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "How does something like this even start? He's my best friend. He's been to our home hundreds of times. We've celebrated holidays together, gone on vacations together. How do you go from that to this?" Amanda wiped her eyes, struggling to meet my gaze. "It wasn't planned, Lucas. You have to believe that. Neither of us wanted this to happen. But it did happen." I exploded, months of repressed anger and hurt suddenly erupting. "It didn't just happen once in a moment of weakness. It happened repeatedly for half a year. That's not an accident, Amanda. That's a choice. Hundreds of choices. Every single time you texted him, met him, lied to me." "I know," she sobbed. "I know there's no excuse. But you want to know how it started? Fine, I'll tell you." She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling in her lap. "It was in March. That weekend you went to the architecture conference in Seattle. Mark came over to help me with the living room design, like we'd planned. We had wine. We were talking, really talking in a way I realized we'd never done before. He told me about his divorce, about how he'd felt invisible in his marriage. And I admitted that I'd been feeling the same way. Invisible. I repeated, incredulous. "You felt invisible?" "I'm right here, Amanda. I've always been right here." "Physically, yes," she said quietly. "But emotionally? When's the last time we had a real conversation, Lucas? One that wasn't about work schedules or household chores or surface-level pleasantries. When did we stop really seeing each other? Don't you dare try to blame this on me," I said, my voice dangerously low. "If you were unhappy, you talk to your husband. You don't sleep with his best friend." "You're right," Amanda admitted, fresh tears streaming down her face. "You're absolutely right. That's what I should have done. But I didn't, and I can't take it back. That night with Mark, we connected in a way I hadn't felt in years. We talked until 3 in the morning, and somewhere in all that talking, we kissed. It was supposed to be just that one night, a mistake we'd never repeat. But then we couldn't stop thinking about each other. The texts started innocently enough, but they became more frequent, more intimate. And then we met again, and before I knew it, I was in too deep." "Did you love him?" I asked, not sure I wanted to hear the answer. "I don't know," Amanda said after a long pause. "I thought I did. In those moments with him, it felt real. He made me laugh, made me feel desired, made me feel like I mattered. But maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was just escape, a fantasy version of life without the responsibilities and routines that had made our marriage feel stale. Our marriage felt stale to you. Each revelation was another wound. And your solution was to have an affair with my best friend instead of talking to me about it." Before Amanda could respond, there was a knock at the door. We both froze. I knew, somehow, who it would be before I even looked through the peephole. Mark stood on our front porch, looking anxious. He must have received a text from Amanda warning him that I knew, or perhaps he'd tried to call her and gotten no response. I opened the door with barely contained rage. "You have some nerve showing up here." Mark's face was pale, his usual confident demeanor completely gone. "Lucas, please, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "What's there to explain, Mark? You've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months, while pretending to be my friend, sitting at my table, drinking my beer, acting like nothing was wrong. What possible explanation could make that okay?" "There isn't one," Mark said quietly, not attempting to enter the house. "I know that, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. You're my best friend. Don't you dare call yourself my friend." I shouted. "Friends don't do what you did. Friends don't betray each other like this. You're nothing to me now. Nothing." Mark flinched as if I'd struck him. "I understand you're angry." "Angry?" I interrupted. "Angry doesn't even begin to cover what I'm feeling right now. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You took my trust, my friendship, 20 years of history, and you threw it all away to sleep with my wife. And the worst part? You knew exactly what you were doing. Every single time." "I didn't know," Mark admitted, his voice breaking. "And I hated myself for it. Every time I looked at you, every time we hung out, the guilt was eating me alive. But I couldn't stop. I tried. God knows I tried. But what?" I demanded. "But you couldn't keep your hands off her. But your feelings were more important than your loyalty to your best friend. I don't want to hear your excuses, Mark. I don't want your apologies. I want you out of my life. Forever." Both Amanda and Mark tried to explain over the following hours, offering reasons that sounded hollow and inadequate. They blamed emotional distance, loneliness, a spark that had ignited between them that they claimed was beyond their control. Mark talked about his recent divorce and the vulnerability it had created. Amanda spoke about feeling taken for granted, about the routine of our marriage becoming suffocating rather than comforting. But no excuse could repair the fracture there their betrayal created. Every explanation felt like an insult, another layer of disrespect added to the original wound. The trust I'd placed in them, the absolute, unquestioning trust that forms the foundation of the deepest relationships, felt shattered beyond repair. In the days that followed, I moved through my life in a fog. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep without being haunted by images of them together. I told a few close colleagues what had happened, needing someone to talk to, and their shock and sympathy somehow made it worse. Everyone who knew us had thought we were solid. Lucas and Amanda, a perfect couple, with Mark as the loyal friend who was always around. The reality behind that facade was devastating not just to me, but to everyone who'd believed in what we represented. We tried counseling, more out of paralysis than hope. Amanda begged for a chance to rebuild our marriage, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake that she regretted deeply. She'd ended things with Mark immediately after I discovered them, blocked his number, agreed to any conditions I wanted to set. But even as we sat in the therapist's office, talking through our feelings and examining the breakdown in our communication, I couldn't get past the fundamental betrayal. The therapist, Dr. Morrison, was kind but direct. She explained that recovering from infidelity is possible, but requires both partners to be fully committed to the process. She talked about rebuilding trust gradually, establishing new patterns of communication, addressing the underlying issues that had made our marriage vulnerable to betrayal. Amanda nodded earnestly, promising to do whatever it took, but I couldn't shake the images burned into my brain, not just of what I'd seen in those messages, but of every interaction I now reinterpreted through this new lens. Every time Mark had been at our house, every laugh Amanda and he had shared, every time they'd exchanged glances I'd thought were innocent. It all meant something different now, and I couldn't unsee it. Therapy sessions revealed deeper truths about our marriage that were painful in their own right. Amanda admitted that she'd felt lonely for years, that she'd tried to tell me in subtle ways that went unheard. I'd been so focused on my career, on building my reputation as an architect, that I'd stopped putting effort into our relationship. We'd become roommates who occasionally had sex rather than partners truly invested in each other's lives. I had to acknowledge my own role in creating the conditions that made the affair possible. I hadn't been attentive to Amanda's emotional needs, hadn't noticed when she'd pulled away, hadn't made our marriage the priority it deserved to be. But recognizing my own failures didn't make her betrayal any easier to accept. She could have divorced me, separated, demanded counseling, given me an ultimatum, anything but what she chose to do. Months later, after countless therapy sessions that felt more like painful excavations than healing, Amanda left our home. The decision was mutual, or at least mutually acknowledged as necessary. We tried to rebuild something from the wreckage, but some breaks are too complete to mend. The foundation of trust that a marriage requires had been not just cracked, but demolished, and we'd been trying to build on ruins. Mark and I severed our friendship forever, a loss that in some ways hurt as much as losing Amanda. 20 years of friendship ended not with anger anymore. The rage had burned itself out, but with a profound sadness for what had been destroyed. He'd sent letters apologizing, trying to explain, but I couldn't read them without feeling ill. Eventually, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved out of state, perhaps unable to face the social consequences of what he'd done, or maybe just trying to start fresh somewhere new. The divorce was finalized on a gray November afternoon. The proceedings relatively simple since we'd agreed on terms without much fight. We'd divided our possessions with surprising ease. She took the furniture she'd chosen. I kept the house I'd helped design. Neither of us fought over anything, because we both knew that things were just things, meaningless compared to what we'd lost. This story taught me that betrayal can come from the people you love and trust the most. It's a lesson I wish I'd never had to learn, but one that has fundamentally changed how I approach relationships. I learned that trust is the most valuable and fragile thing we possess, easily destroyed and nearly impossible to fully restore once broken. I learned that healing requires learning to rebuild trust carefully in small increments, with people who've proven themselves worthy of it. I'm more cautious now about who I let into my inner circle, more aware of the red flags I might have ignored before. I value honesty above all else, because I've experienced firsthand the devastation that lies can create. 2 years have passed since that September night when my world collapsed. I've done a lot of work on myself through individual therapy, examining not just what was done to me, but who I was in that marriage and who I want to be moving forward. I've learned that while I wasn't responsible for Amanda's choice to cheat, I was responsible for the ways I'd neglected our relationship and taken her presence for granted. I'm dating again now, taking things slowly, being more communicative about my needs and expectations from the very beginning. I'm learning to trust again, though it doesn't come easily. Every new relationship is shadowed by the specter of past betrayal, but I'm working on not letting that fear prevent me from being vulnerable and open. The house feels different now, lighter in some ways, despite the loneliness. It's mine alone, decorated to my taste, free from the tension that had filled it during those final months with Amanda. I've thrown myself into work, taking on projects that challenge me, finding satisfaction in creating solid structures even if my personal life remains a work in progress. I occasionally see Amanda around Denver. It's inevitable in a city this size when you share professional circles. We're cordial when we cross paths, exchanging brief pleasantries before moving on. There's no lingering anger anymore, just a profound sadness for what we once had and how thoroughly we destroyed it. Mark, I haven't seen since the day I told him to leave. I heard he's engaged now to someone he met in his new city, building a new life far from the wreckage he left behind here. I don't wish him ill, but I don't wish him well either. He exists in a space of profound indifference for me now, someone I once knew who became a stranger through his own choices. The experience has made me value genuine friendships more deeply. I've cultivated relationships with people who've proven their loyalty, who show up not just during the easy times, but during the hard ones. I'm more selective about who I call friend, understanding now that the title should be earned and kept through consistent action, not just years of proximity. I've also become an advocate for honest communication in relationships, sharing my story with other men going through similar betrayals. There's a support group I attend monthly where we discuss the aftermath of infidelity and the long road to healing. Hearing others' stories and sharing mine has been therapeutic, reminding me that while my pain was unique to me, the experience of betrayal is sadly common. What I've learned most profoundly is that you can never truly know another person's capacity for deception until they choose to reveal it. The Amanda and Mark I thought I knew would never have betrayed me, but that version of them existed only in my perception, not in reality. People are capable of far more harm than we want to believe, especially when they rationalize their actions as justified by unhappiness or unmet needs. But I've also learned that survival is possible after betrayal of this magnitude. The first months felt impossibly dark, like I'd never feel whole again. But slowly, painfully, I've rebuilt myself into someone stronger and more self-aware. The scars remain, and probably always will, but they've become part of my story rather than the entirety of it. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, to believe that while I miss signs I should have seen, I'm not fundamentally broken or naive for having trusted people who didn't deserve it. The fault lies with those who chose betrayal, not with the person who chose to trust. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting or even fully forgiving. It's about accepting what happened, understanding my own role in it, and choosing to move forward with wisdom gained from the experience. It's about refusing to let their betrayal turn me into someone bitter and closed off, someone who can never trust again. The mountain views from my office window have become meaningful again, reminding me that solid foundations matter, whether in architecture or in life. And this time, I'm building my life on a foundation I've carefully examined and reinforced, one that can withstand the storms I know are possible, even if I hope they never come again.